Addiction can be seen as a disease, and addiction can be seen as a choice. My issue with it being seen as a choice is that nobody ever chose to become addicted.
Can you just tell us your first introduction to drugs?
Oh. I'd spent a lot of my time in school as someone who wasn't particularly accepted by any groups, and I found a group of people who I sort of bonded with, and they all happened to be cannabis smokers. When you meet a group that is accepting of you, it's quite easy to subscribe to the social norms, and the social norms within that group were taking drugs. Within a couple of years, started to move on to harder drugs. Probably around the age of 17, had my first introduction to heroin. You've been told the risks, to some extent, of addiction, of dependence, but when I was growing up, the real thing that they were pushing in the media was the dangers of ecstasy. There wasn't that much talk about heroin, how much it can grip you, the actual physical dependency that you can end up developing. If I only used every few days, then it became maybe every other day. You know, a few weeks later, you've got a habit. Not using is causing you a lot of physical discomfort. It certainly didn't feel like this vilified drug any kind of media had given me the idea about. As time went on, it became a more frequent thing. And by then we had a number, someone we could ring if we wanted to score. I was completely teetotal when it came to alcohol. I guess I saw alcohol as quite a dirty drug, which may sound ironic to people, but go out in the streets and you'd see the carnage that was caused on a Friday night by all these people who were drinking. I just never saw that with any illicit drugs. You know, when I was around people who were smoking weed, they were very sedate, they were very chilled, philosophical. When I saw people taking ecstasy, they were all loved up and just wanted to hug each other. I never saw any fights, I never saw any dramas. That all seemed to be linked to alcohol. It tends to be a mood enhancer rather than a mood changer. With a lot of drugs, you're more in control than people assume you're going to be. Barring hallucinogenic drugs, there's not that many that kind of completely split you from reality. I had a very intense experience on the magic mushrooms, actually, where I had a complete split from reality. You could call it a psychotic episode, I don't know, but at some stage in the trip, something switched. I got very paranoid, very scared, and was quite convinced that I'd gone mad. I think the only sober thought I could have at that moment was that I'd become one of these drug casualties that you hear about, someone who ends up breaking their brain. Around that time, when I was kind of 19, I wasn't quite at the height of my addiction at that point. I was what people kind of maybe wrongly term as a functioning addict. I was muddling through. I was probably using more drugs on a shift to get through work than I was getting paid that day. So it was kind of getting to a point really where even the work was unsustainable. It's a difficult cycle to break. I think something has to change in us where we have a desire to do something different. I run an alcohol group every Tuesday morning, and there's people in there who could tell me the price of a can of special brew in every shop within a 5-mile radius. They have an intense determination to perpetuate their addiction, the motivation to get up every day, to fight off the withdrawals, the resilience. All of these factors are the kind of skills that successful businessmen have. There is no other job other than being an addict where you can put that much energy in and get nowhere. I remember conducting an assessment with somebody. Street homeless, no benefit, so no home, no income. When it came to his drug use, he was spending £100 a day on drugs. The level of resource and commitment to be able to do that, that's 36.5 grand a year with no job, with no benefits, with no home. You're spending all day trying to raise enough money to scoring, using, and then waiting to feel ill again. It doesn't stop. There's no real respite. Nobody, when they picked up a drug for the first time, said, right, my plan is in a year I'm going to be addicted to this and it's going to be ruling my life. We start off in a stage of what they called pre-contemplation, which is denial, in essence. It's, I haven't begun to think about making a change yet. From this, the next move is into contemplation, where we start thinking about the problem. Stage 3 is making a decision. And then stage 4 is taking action, like actually starting to implement a plan to make some changes. And when these changes are underpinned and we're where we want to be, that becomes stage 5, the maintenance stage. Final stage, stage 6, is relapse. Relapse back into the old behaviour and potentially going around the cycle again. The thing I find useful about this in treatment is sometimes we get so fixated on the end goal of getting someone into recovery that we don't work with them where they're at. If somebody is still in denial, talking about recovery is pointless. The work should be to get them from the denial into the contemplation, not from the denial into the recovery kind of stage. Once you're getting someone contemplating the problem, then you can start getting them to pin down some decisions and setting some action targets. Most human beings need to feel happy. We need some level of validation, and responsibility gives us that. Often, when you're going through a program with AA or NA and you get a sponsor, one suggestion sometimes is to get a plant, because you're then responsible for the well-being of that plant. A plant's quite a good thing because it's not too much responsibility, and if you don't manage it, it's not earth-shattering. You know, a sponsor once said to me, if in a year your plant's still alive, you might be all right with a pet. And if in a year your pet's still alive, you might be all right with a relationship. It's building up those levels of responsibility slowly.
You found that worked for you then?
And my plant died, and I was already in a relationship. So, and I got a lot of stick about that, particularly when I was expecting my first child and my plant was dead. But I have 2 children, they're lovely, they're doing all right, doing a lot better than the plant. Drug treatment is being squeezed. The money's coming out, and much as I hate to admit it, drug services are partly at fault for this, because when the NTA disbanded and we didn't have that advocate, instead of us all standing up for our discipline, we started fighting each other over contracts, trying to undercut each other. Now you've got more and more unrealistic targets for the money that's been invested. The service I work in, a general recovery worker will carry a caseload of about 60. If your expectation is on rehabilitation and you're giving people caseloads where you can only see someone for half an hour every 2 weeks, like how realistic is your impact going to be? I think if I can remember some of the people from the past who have positive recovery stories, that does remind me in my times of feeling low that people do get better, people do beat this. One of my cases popped back in the door. He'd done really well. He'd gone from, living in a squat, no money, no food, no access to anything. And he had managed to complete treatment successfully. He'd got off all drugs, he'd managed to get housing. He came in to tell me that his life was going really well and that he was working and earning more than me. So he was quite proud, but grateful, very grateful for the intervention. I stopped using in February 2009. I wanted to look into some kind of viable future. If I had an actual profession, something that I was going to do for a period of time, what would I like to do? And what do I think I could do? And one thing I thought I would enjoy doing and possibly be good at is working in some kind of rehabilitation setting. And that, probably more than anything else, was the driver for me to get clean. I had this goal in my head that I would work as some kind of recovery worker. There are things that stick in my mind, and feelings as much as experiences. You know, the connectivity of being around other people on drugs before it's become problematic, and that feeling of we're all in this together, this real sense of spirit and community. I don't want to go into great detail about what I would call euphoric recall. For one thing, I know that my memory will have edited that to make it better than it was. And I also don't think it's helpful in terms of my recovery or anyone else's recovery journey. The thing that I do find helpful is if I do have to think back to those memories, I'm going back between 15 and 20 years. That reminds me that there was a good period of using that was not memorable at all. I think the thing that is vital in anything is that you make sure that the client is making the choices and taking the ownership of their recovery. Because it can't be my recovery for them, it's got to be their recovery. If I keep wiping your ass, you'll ring me every time you've had a shit. It's about balancing the supportive element with the enabling element. I'm a tool in that journey. I am somebody who can be a guide. I'm somebody who can assist. I'm not somebody who can do. The journey of recovery is going to be down to that individual and that individual's own goals and beliefs. My role is to plant seeds. It's the role of the individual to water those and make them grow. I'm Andy Moyer. I'm a recovery worker in a drug service in Reading.